Welcome, Jeff. Good to have you back on the podcast.
It's great to be here.
Let's get into it. What are some of the pitfalls that occur when an organization brings on a brand new CEO?
A lot of times what I see is whoever is exiting, particularly if they've been there for a very long time, or if it's a forced exit, they're looking for just the opposite. They might need just the opposite, but they don't necessarily want just the opposite, right? Three out of five new CEOs tend to fail to meet up to the board expectations in the first 18 months. So there's just so much that needs to happen. And think about it, Raj, it's a major transition to bring in a new person at the helm, right? And just think of all the relationships and all the dynamics that existed before then. Now you're seriously disrupting that system.
There's a lot of ripple effect that can happen here. So an executive coach can help. Let's talk about that. How does an executive coach make that transition more smooth? How do you help ensure that CEO success?
One of the things is that an executive coach is a confidential relationship between the executive and then the coach, right? And so it's a place for the new CEO to say, God, I'm really struggling with my board chair, or this board is a mess, or this team is ridiculous and I need to start getting rid of folks. And I'm trying to think about the timing of that, or I'm really having a hard time struggling with the vision or communicating the vision. And so invariably, one of the things that happens early on is the team, so the team dynamics start to change, and then you're going to get tested, right? And so what happens when that first test comes out for the CEO, it's nice to have a coach on the back end, talk it through and get clear and get perspective and then get a plan to help through that situation.
So what are some of the biggest concerns that you see when you're coaching CEOs to take on that role?
One of the big ones that I think a lot of us see are resistance to change. So if you think about it, some folks on the senior team, as an example, and throughout the organization, might be so thankful that there's like finally a new CEO, like how good. I think we've maxed out this last person. Some folks are not. Some folks have got their way in the organization and they've got all their systems in place. And now that's all up for grabs. And in some ways, you're re-interviewing for your job that you're already in. Hey, you can't go to a new CEO and say, hey, the last person said that they were going to give me this promotion next month. You're good with that, right? That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so there's all these dynamics that get messy, quite frankly.
Yeah, you've got to level set expectations. And it's interesting you say that because this isn't just an issue for bringing on a new CEO. It's something that happens with other executives as well. I know when I came in as a CMO to a 200-person company that was going through transition, and there were people who had this relationship with the last person in that role, and I could instantly tell, hey, you took the job of my friend, and that's hard to get past. So you have to have conversations about this, and I think that's one of the things that an executive coach can certainly help. The confidentiality aspect is obviously very key. But what will you advise somebody who's facing that? The CEO is going in, the board wants them to do X, Y, Z. They've brought in to hit numbers, to clean up the mess that the last one, whatever it is. But how do you deal with that? How do you coach the CEO to deal with the change with some people who don't want that change?
Yeah, so there's a couple thoughts I have. First of all, even starting with the mandate that you just talked about with the board, right? So imagine there's a selection process happening. It's probably a national search, even potentially beyond. And so you're interviewing, you're auditioning for the part. And the board, if it's a board that kind of steps out of their role as governance and says, basically, you need to fire this person, it's the last person didn't do. And what are you committing to? Okay, I got you. Or what should be appropriate? Look, I'm definitely going to assess the team and then I'll make some determination. And if it looks like with the strategy, the vision, the priorities, that those folks aren't aligned, which it sounds like from what you're saying, that's what I'm going to find, then that's absolutely what we're going to do. But it needs to be an executive decision, not a board decision. But anyway, so let's say you get there and now here you are. It's day one, right? And so now you're going to meet with the team and you're going to meet one-on-one with folks as well. And so one of the things I like to tell any new leader, particularly if it was an internal candidate that was promoted, so now you appear like yesterday, and now you're the boss, right?
Yeah.
And so what excites you about this? Like now that you're reporting to me, what's exciting to you about? What worries you about it? What? How can I help with that? And so really, both of you talk, even the CEO saying, "Look, this is what I'm excited about being here. Here's what I'm worried about, though." And then early on, let's say 2 months in or something, you start to really get to know the different team members. You can be really honest with them. Here's what I'm seeing that I'm really liking, right? What you're doing, and here's something though that I would have a little bit of concern about, and then talking through that.
You mentioned the board, and we talked about the board's mandate. So, how does the board factor into that CEO's success or failure?
It's huge. I can give an example of a situation where I was brought in by the board. So three things are coming quickly to mind where the board brought me in. In this particular example, it was a nonprofit, and I was there to work with the executive director after there had been some sort of fallout with the team, right? So the board was starting to lose a little confidence in the ED. And when they brought me in, I was like, look, I got to be really clear. Like, you're either doing an investigation, which what I'm hearing we're not doing, and that's not my role, or you truly believe in this person and you want to give them executive coach to help them be successful. So this is a confidential relationship. So fast forward, I had to talk several times with the board chair, stop getting in his way. And so, for example, she had a relationship with somebody who reported to the executive director, and that person kept going over his head to her friend, and she wasn't saying, you need to go talk to him about it. So I finally, after the third conversation, I said, you've got to stop doing this. He is going to fail if you keep undermining his authority by letting his team go directly to you. I know. And they did stop that, and he was ultimately successful. But anyway, so that's one of the things that can happen. So when there's a transition of CEO, you can imagine some of the dynamics of the board are going to change. And then they're going to like everyone's got their own agenda, right? It's an appointed board, right? Not you're the best person qualified for the job, right? And so the board, the new CEO has to deal with those personalities, right? And form a really good relationship with the board where they are making sure that the board stays in their lane. It's quite a balance, right, Raj, where you're showing, yes, I want input. Let's talk about this together. Let's think about the direction. But no, that's an executive decision, not a board decision.
The board isn't going to hire somebody that they know is going to fail, and they don't want them to fail. But there are a lot of board members that may have conflicting opinions about direction. And there are times when they try to overstep their bounds, and they're trying to act in that CEO capacity or force the CEO to make decisions, and they really just want a puppet CEO. And what are some of and by the way, I think like an executive coach in this situation can be really critical, because having that private time so that the CEO can discuss this to see if there's any light bulbs that they haven't turned on yet, I think is really important to have that safe space. It's making me wonder whether there is some sort of, not HR checklist, but if there's some sort of mental checklist that a board should consider for an executive coach when they hire a CEO. Is there something that they should be considered, like, we are going to do this, we're not going to do this, or is it just too fluid to be able to even address something like that?
It's, thinking like SWOT analysis, right? So what are the current strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, threats that the organization faces today and for the next, let's say, 5 years, right? So an initial contract might be a 5-year contract, right? And so now we're looking for somebody that's going to be ideal for where the organization is and needs to go over the next 5+ years. And so they should be looking for very specific characteristics. Now, if you're a large enough organization, even a medium-sized organization, you're hiring a firm to do a search, right? And so the people coming in to do the search will do all that analysis, right? They'll look at what competencies are needed, and they'll reach out to all their connections, and they'll come up with candidates, right? And then they'll do some initial screening of the candidates. And so you really want to work really well with the selection committee internally, as well, working really well with the external firm that's helping you do the search.
So What are some of the things that a CEO should be really careful not to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. One is don't under or over assert your authority. You want the Goldilocks model
How do you know what that is? That's tough
right?
to figure out because you may not know the personality or dynamics of the board members yet.
Yeah, I was thinking with your team, I was thinking in the
Okay.
organization. But to your point, Raj, like, yes, on the board as well, too. With the board, again, it's often what I see often is it's that tension between where does governance end and executive power
Right.
and
Yeah.
authority begin, right? With the team and with others, it's okay. So somebody does something that you don't like, and it's only been like day 3, and it's only one data point. Do you jump in so you don't set a false precedent? That's okay. Do you not jump in? So a lot of times what I see is an organization, a board will bring in a new CEO that, and it's what the organization needs, but not what they want, right? There's a reason why there's problems, right? There's reasons why those problems existed, right? Because the organization is resisting change. And so new person comes in wearing their bat cape, right? And they're here to make change. And then they start, and they're like, they know they're on stage, right? So everyone's
Spotlight
kind of
is right
assessing
on
them.
them to see. All
Right on.
right, new
That's
guy,
right.
new lady. What can you do?
Let's see what you do. And so there's a sense of urgency to want to make changes very quickly. And a lot of times, quite frankly, they're narcissistic, right? People can lack humility and think, oh, I get, this is just like my last organization, or this is like this, right? And they start making assumptions and then feeling this pressure to change. They start making all these changes, and then the people in the organization go, wow. And then they start losing really good people that say, I'm not up for this. Right. And what's left is like the mediocre and not so mediocre folks. And anyway, so that's about knowing when to assert, when not to assert, and having that Goldilocks.
When a CEO confides in a coach, one of the things that they can bring to the table are pressures that they're getting from the team and from the board, because the CEO sits in the middle, right? Board's above, and then they've got the team below. A lot of times people just think, okay, I'm bringing a CEO, everything's going to be fine, but they really have to manage that balance going up too. And I've been in very uncomfortable board meetings, and nobody likes those. And what are some of the expectations that a board should set, or at least understand, when they bring in a coach to help the CEO navigate their first whatever period of time? Because you're not acting in an advisory role, right? You're not telling the CEO what to do, but maybe a board might want that. So like, how do you?
Well, you're hopefully not telling him what to do from an executive decision perspective. Like I always cringe when it's like somebody comes in, like, you need to fire this person like on day 1. In fact, by the way, if you're the new CEO, one of the things that you're telling the committee, the on the board, is clean up your mess before I get there, because you're gonna make some moves early on, and that makes sense, right? In some ways, you can build equity by, oh, good, they finally got rid of that dead weight that was pulling the team down. Okay, that's fine, except, right, there's first impressions of everything, right? And so there's first moves that you make. It would be nice if they were yours, and to the degree that possible, the mess could be cleaned up before you get there, right? And I always say, too, particularly if there's a change mandate, like we need to create great efficiencies, reduce costs, improve the margins, then there's usually going to be resistance, particularly, again, if there was an issue with the past person. And there often needs to be a sacrificial lamb, right? So that you have a few pockets and 3 people kind of team up and they're really resisting the change. And the person that's resisting the most, they're the one, you let them go, right? This is where you need to assert, right? And there's a statement. Oh, okay, this person means business, right? And then by the way, when you do that, then it's really clear to couple that with, here's the vision and here's what's exciting about it. Communicate a compelling vision. Let them know, here's how we're going to get there. Give them an advance notice. There's going to be some bumps in the road. Here's what some of those bumps might look like. There's going to be more that we can't really predict, right? So really helping them as you have this sacrificial lamb moment, like giving something else everybody else, particularly that you want still to be there, something exciting to look
I
for.
want to talk about the senior team for a minute because the CEO can't do everything all by themselves. They need reliable, dependable people. And when they come in, they don't know the caliber of the senior team unless they through reputation or past experience. And so sometimes the board will say, yeah, go in, put in whoever you want, bring in your team. Sometimes it's going to be, this is the team, you need to like work with them. And so it can be different in each case. What's a good way to advise a CEO to navigate those types of relationships?
Yeah, first of all, it's a great question. First of all, it's really common that the CEO brings in their
Yeah.
number two, right? And they probably also said, I'm also bringing in my
I was going to say that
assistant.
next. I was going to say they bring in their own assistant too. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Almost across the board, anyone who's being forward thinking in terms of onboarding the new CEO, you're almost always going to have, most likely, an external coach who's going to help do an assessment. So you're doing like a 360 with the team. So let's say it's 6 to 8 weeks in, and the executive coach is interviewing all the team members, what's working, what's not working, and trying to get a sense of communication, collaboration, decision-making, right? Where are some of the problem areas? What's new and exciting that seems to be working? And then they're doing the same thing with the CEO. From your perspective, what are you noticing with the team dynamics, with how communication is happening, what's working there or not working, collaboration, decision-making? And then you bring them together, right? And so there's a 360 kind of done, sort of a 360 done from the team on the CEO, and then vice versa. And then there's a retreat, right? Maybe a little team building, but then a facilitated conversation. So here's what we're hearing. Let's talk about that, right? And then ideally coming out of that with a set of agreements about how to best communicate, collaborate, and make decisions, as well as an action plan with metrics, deliverables, timelines. And then in 3 months, get out the calendars on this date. We're coming back together, and then we're going to see how we're doing.
One of my favorite books on this is Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And so they talk about the different types of people, and some people just need to go because they're detractors. They're not contributors to the whole thing, and they certainly can't get on board with the new agenda or be aligned. What are some of the other pitfalls that the CEOs either fall into or need to just be aware of, watch for?
Yeah, so the word culture is coming up to me, right? So when you talked about sometimes people need to go, my mind went to the weird, like, so there's a culture. The culture is sticking to the walls. It's sticking to the people, right? In some ways, we're all pawned in the roles that we play, right? There's what people bring their individual personalities, right? And sometimes there's a mismatch there, right? But they're also stuck in their role, which, by the way, might be changing, and it might even be the wrong role, right? And so there's these roles and responsibilities, which that is one of the things I definitely see as a huge problem across the board, even without the new CEO, is lack of clarity in terms of roles and responsibilities, who has final ownership, and how are decisions made, and when it doesn't work, what's the backup system. But that said, there's the culture of sticking to folks. Then you have this new person coming in that doesn't really fit in yet. So they are trying to get a sense of the culture. What are the hidden rules? What are the symbols? What are the unspoken rules and ideas? And they're trying to get a sense of that. They're trying to assimilate into that to some degree, but they're also probably trying to drive change. And when it comes to driving change, if listeners to only take one thing away from this session, it's this: the word capacity, right? I talked earlier about coming in with the bat cape, and you're going in to oftentimes to drive change. And the new CEO gets stuck on their get excited about their mandate, and they start driving change very quickly. An organization, particularly if it's a long term, it's been around for a long time, has only so much capacity to deal with that change. And so I beg anybody who's in this position to constantly monitor the capacity for change, pushing forward, but don't push people over the cliff. And then make sure that you have a feedback loop set in place with really everybody, but with your key folks, so that you can get a sense of, am I pushing too much or am I not pushing enough?
One of the things that companies do periodically is they actually have professional coaching for all of the senior team members, not just the CEO. And I think everybody can benefit from professional coaching. I've had coaches for years, really elevated my professional and personal life. What do you think about the idea of having the same coach for the CEO as for the team, or should it be different?
It's funny. I worked with the CEO once, and he said, so we were working together. We were finishing our engagement. Says, it's too bad you're never gonna work with anybody else in here because you're my guy. And then 3 months later, I got a call from him saying, I want you to work with my general counsel. I'm like, what happened to me not working with anybody else? Now, in that scenario, it was fine because it was actually helpful because I knew this person, I knew him well, but I wasn't working with him. And it's not that it can never work, but I would 95% of the time, no.
I think like because there's no safe environment at that point.
From the coach's perspective. So look, I'm a business psychologist. Like I was trained in confidentiality. Decades ago, I worked with families. And so the parents loved me and the kids loved me because somehow I knew how to and maintain confidentiality and be like, everyone's right. And when I'm with one person, like I'm completely in their story. And when I'm with the other person, I'm in their story. So I can do it. And I've done it before, but it's generally not recommended because they got their stuff. You don't want them with whether you're the direct report, the senior team member or the CEO, to withhold information to you because they worry, what are you telling them? And then think about this, Raj. Imagine that you did your part. You maintained confidentiality. You were like on point. But somebody found something else. Somebody found something out through the grapevine, that had nothing to do with you. And it was like, something that the, CEOs, they didn't want out. Yeah. You've just lost your trust. And once you lose trust, you've lost everything.
That's such a critical point. And I like that you keep everything separate because I think if you're the executive coach for the CEO, that's it. You're helping them navigate all of the waters that they've got to.
Yeah. Now real quick. Now that said, one of the things that has worked well for me, and some people still might differ on this, but I've worked with the CEO and then we brought the team in. Now this is an intact team. There was trust in the team. They still needed to create a little bit more psychological safety and have healthy conflict. So I worked with the entire team over the course of close to 18 months, and everyone knew the CEO was already my client, and that worked really well because I was having ongoing conversations with the CEO. Though in between retreats, I would have one-on-ones with team members. To me, if I was going to start from a whiteboard, I would say the CEO has a coach. To your point, is ideally the team members have their own coach.
Would you mean each person has a different coach, or?
Well, that's what I was just saying. So it could be a different coach, or it could be like 3 coaches for a team of 8 or 9 kind of thing. But then if you're bringing folks together, then in my fantasy, you've got the CEO and their coach, and then you have if there's somebody working with the team as an entity, and then they're there. And so you're co-leading this retreat. The coaches who are bound in confidentiality can talk amongst themselves for the good of the organization and the good of their client, the team and the CEO, and really put together a retreat where you can really improve.
I think if there's one thing that everybody has to know, especially the board, is that this is all about human relationships. And it's about creating feelings, really, like how your team is feeling about you, how you're feeling about your team, how the board's feeling about you, all that. And I think that's something that some people may look at the role as very analytical, get this done, let's go do it. But I think that's where a coach can really help, is make sure that human element, which is really, like, honestly, the crux of so much, is taken into account.
Yeah, when I coach people who are about to meet their new boss, and when I'm coaching the new boss who's about to meet their people, I beg them both to don't jump in with the business. Like, so here's where we are with this division and this whatever, but start with, so tell me about you. Where are you from? What's important to you? What are your hobbies? How long you've been here? why are you here? What's your long-term vision? I know that you do that a lot, which is really good. How can I help you get there? But really getting to know the person first. And that certainly that first week should be really about relationship building, right? I love it when I hear, I remember working with a leader once who this person was so fired up to have everything ready for the new CEO. They had all their like figures ready and their facts, like they were like prepared to tell the new CEO anything they needed to know about their areas of responsibility. And so I said, how did it go? And this guy came back the next day. We just talked about ourselves for an hour. I'm like, great to hear it. That's good.
Build the bond. Honestly, that's like literally the central focal point of everything.
Yeah, but we didn't know if the new CEO was going to.
Yeah.
Like I would have advised the new CEO to do that. We didn't know.
Yeah.
A lot of times they just get right
Yeah.
down to business, and you got to be ready.
Let's go look at the P&L and figure out what's wrong. And yeah,
that's right. And so when I tell the direct report, I say, look, if the CEO is the kind of person that does that, and say, absolutely, I've got everything ready, go over it, and ideally get ahead of it, the agenda. Can we just take the first 15 minutes and just talk about how we can best communicate and collaborate? I'd love to just get to know you a little bit more to whatever extent you want to share, and maybe share a little bit about me, and then really figure out how I can best support you and support the organization. And then ideally share a little bit about what I've learned that works really well for me in terms of when I've worked with managers that worked really well. So you try to sneak that in there.
Yeah. I want to close out with this one question, and that is, how long should a new CEO have their executive coach?
A year and then plus, right? So I would say you absolutely want the engagement going in should be a year, right? That's a critical time. And then beyond that, you can see where you are. A lot of times it's then the trusted advisor, right? Where you're now meeting once a month, or you're doing other things with this. Ideally, it's a partner, it's an internal trusted partner for the duration, but you don't need the level of intensity that you do the first month, but 6 months would not be enough.
I agree with you 100%. I've had coaches for years, not just 1 year. And the reason is, when you have that one coach and you've built this relationship with them, what I found was when I would go start talking about something, they remembered what I said 7 months ago. And they pushed me to, Raj, draw that line for me. Why are you saying this when last 7 months ago we were talking about this? And that makes me pause and really get deeper inside my own thinking. And I found that the longer that I've had these strong relationships, and this has to be with a good coach, not every coach can manage this. And you're leadership coach of the year. You're a very good coach. You and I have been talking for many years, and I know how you ask questions, and they are, if anybody wants to have an example, go search executive coaching demo on YouTube, and you'll find a beautiful one. And so I think, that's so critical, keeping that person for a long period of time and allowing that relationship to build, and allowing all of those insights to just start to pop up, because they're not going to happen right away.
1,000%. Even being able to say, look, Raj, and this isn't Raj, this is literally a conversation, Tad, but remember that adjustment score on your Hogan personality assessment? That's what's showing up right now.
Yeah.
And so this is right all in your head. Let's just take a breath. And so being able to not have to revisit. So who are you every 6 months?
I think a good coach helps you see what you can't see. And in a new CEO role, that is one of the most important functions you've got, is you've got to be able to look ahead. And if there's a blind spot, you need someone that's a trusted, safe person you can talk to help you see that.
Yeah, to both support you and challenge you, and to hold you accountable and help you hold yourself accountable. But right, the person that's going to say, okay, so you said you want to be accountable for this.
Yeah.
How are we doing?
Wonderful dialogue, Jeff. And I think anybody who's looking to bring a CEO on board, of the entire process of CEO onboarding, using an executive coach to do that, is a great program to put as part of that onboarding experience. And it's certainly going to take the company a lot farther. Thanks again. We'll see you next time on the podcast.
All right. Great seeing you.